My name is Michael Furman. I am originally from Louisiana, raised in a Christian family. And God made it very clear after I had been married for 7 years that my wife and I and our then 3 children were to move from our native state to Augusta, Georgia. We actually moved in faith without a job to join the Alleluia community. And I say without a job because at that time we really wanted to devote ourselves full time to whatever God wanted. We just knew He wanted us in Augusta. Now, we have a call on our lives, both my wife Beverly and I, to serve the poor. And that's what we had been doing in Louisiana since before we were married. We met at a ministry serving the poor called Hope House in New Orleans. But coming to Augusta, we reasoned that our first call was to be rather than to do, and therefore being in an intentional Christian community was a greater priority and a greater call than the call to serve the poor. Well, God gave us both the best of both worlds, because again, we came in faith without a job, and it was the middle of the big recession in 1981, 82, and there was 25% unemployment in the country. It was the worst possible time, and from a worldly point of view, to move anywhere in faith and hope to find a job. But again, that's how God works. From our experience throughout our lives, it's how He works. He wants us to have faith, and then He provides. Well, shortly after we moved, I had put my resume in at the Alleluia Community Office. And in that resume, I mentioned that I had helped to start 3 faith-based nonprofits back in Louisiana. Well, I didn't know that one of the community members was the head of Greater Augusta Presbyterian Ministries and was on a citizens committee in Richmond County, Augusta. And this citizens committee was trying to start a food bank, a ministry with the poor to feed the hungry. Food banks were springing up in major cities throughout the United States. In fact, I had helped to start the New Orleans Food Bank. So when Gary Bainton saw my resume and realized I had started nonprofits from scratch, and he was on the Citizens Committee to try to get a nonprofit organization called a food bank started here in Augusta, he contacted me and told me that he had already arranged a meeting between the Citizens Committee and myself for January the 12th. Now, this was just before New Year's of 81. So January 12th of 82, I met with this group of people whom I had never met before. I'm brand new to this area of Georgia. And they asked me a bunch of questions about my background and what I hoped for and what God had laid on my heart. And they offered me the job of being the first executive director of this new organization. Only they didn't even have an organization, and they had no money. So since I had started the previous organizations from scratch, I knew that they had to form a nonprofit corporation. They had to get an attorney to draw up articles of incorporation and file with the Secretary of State and with the IRS Form 1023. So I agreed to volunteer to do that for them, but I really wasn't interested in working for the food bank because I knew from previous experience how long and what a sacrifice that was. It really takes total devotion to start something from scratch, especially in a locale with which I was totally unfamiliar. I wanted a 9-to-5 job that would give me time to devote to this new community life I had longed for so long. So I told him I would volunteer to help him get it off the ground, but I was not interested in being the director and moving it forward. And so time went on and I kept looking for work. I couldn't find work. Our savings were getting depleted and we had decided to apply for food stamps because I couldn't find a job. In the meantime, the committee kept asking me, please reconsider, please reconsider. So finally, I sought the Lord and decided almost reluctantly that God had shut all the other doors and that he wanted me to take this job. So rather than the food bank being a dream of mine, it was like I was backed into it by the Lord. He had closed all the other doors. And so my first day on the job was March 15th of 1982. And there was enough money in the bank to pay me for a month. So Alleluia Community kicked in some money to help it get started. I was given space in a county commissioner's office in a poor part of town as my first office. And then that man got a very wealthy man who owned a former disco joint downtown in downtown Augusta to let us use the building rent-free. The name of the bar room with a lighted dance floor was called Daddy's Money. So it was painted flat black inside and out. And the guy actually had dealt drugs there and committed suicide. So I and volunteers from the community came in. We tore out the dance floor, moved the big bar to one side, and that became the first warehouse of Greater Augusta Food Bank. Because the vision was really for just Augusta and maybe 2 or 3 other counties. Our first donation was a 50-pound block of chocolate from a defunct candy factory. And our next donations were cases of salad dressing. But we kept going. More volunteers came from churches that started to contribute to us. And then the agencies that serve the poor started to come to us for food. And then we got more food. There was a canning company in Augusta called Castleberry's, and Castleberry's would donate canned meats to us. We also reached out to other food banks in Georgia and established a relationship like with the Atlanta Food Bank and the Savannah Food Bank. And they had surplus food in those cities that they would share with us. And I'd go down in a van and pick up cases and pallets of food and bring it back to Augusta. Slowly grew. One of the toughest things was to form a good board of directors. A corporation has to have a board of directors by law. And if I might say so, being on the board of directors of a brand new organization housed in a former disco joint that people of means would, when they're looking for boards to belong to and to support. It was not the organization of choice, shall we say. The people we helped were the poor. And how we did that directly was we started a soup kitchen.